All right, welcome back to the JP Peterson Show here. An interview I've been looking forward to for quite some time. I want to welcome in Chris Latvala. Hope I'm saying that correctly, Chris. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, of the Pinellas County Commission. Welcome into the show. Really appreciate you jumping in here. And first and foremost, I want to establish you as the Rays fan that you are, because I heard you do an interview yesterday. And I said, this dude knows the prospects. He's been around forever. Let these people know how much you love the Rays and how much you love baseball. He's been around since the Esteban Gone days, which I just love. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah,
those gigantic,
I remember,
right?
I remember going to the games and, late 90s, early 2000s. And, when we had a lead in the seventh inning and certain members of the Rays bullpen got in the game was effectively over. And so, the Lou Piniella days, were a lot of fun. The Quentin McCracken, Damian Rolls, Aubrey Huff, the Hit Show, Vince Namoli, of course.
Right.
And so I'm a Rays fan through and through. And, the current regime of the Rays, has some of the brightest baseball minds in the MLB. Several general managers and front office folks around the league got their start in Tampa Bay. And so, whether it's, the Willie Adames trade when he was a throw-in, and he turned into who he was. We fleeced the Mets in trades. We have bright front office people. And, I used to complain when we traded veterans, but now it's okay. Well, we get Isak Paredes. I'm going to keep my mouth shut because he's going to end up becoming an all-star, somebody that I've never heard of. And so and Kevin Cash does a great job and turns in, we get a new bullpen, it seems like every year. And they just, I think the Rays invented the opener.
Yes, we did.
And now that's used all throughout the game. Even the Dodgers used it this year in the World Series, and they have one of the highest payrolls.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, from a baseball perspective, the Rays, are geniuses.
Yeah.
And they're really inventive and I think really Joe Madden started that, thinking outside the box and in 08 and the years after that. And I remember the 08 season waiting on the Rays to, take a plunge in the standings, and that never happened. And a lot of that reason was because of Joe Madden.
Yeah, best team we ever had.
Yeah.
By far. Well, we've established you as a longtime Rays fans, and I think what people probably need to know here is that you love baseball and you want the Rays here. But this is not the deal to get it done. It may not be the time to get it done with the Pinellas County Commission approving not $312 million, but $600 million with interest, because you have to pay interest on bonds. And that's why I always say, it's always printed as $312 million. It's not that. It's way more than that. And it's a lot of money. It's the most you guys have ever given anybody, anything, anywhere. And delaying a vote may not be a horrible idea. Just tell everybody where you are on this deal now.
Yeah. In July at the meeting, I said, okay, if it's $300 million and we can do $10 million a year for 30 years, I'm a yes. If it's $300 million and we can do $30 million a year for 10 years, I'm a yes. That's not how it works. With construction costs and all that, we have to front the money. And so we don't have that sitting in the bank, so we would have to finance it. And so the financing would be over 30 years, it would be over $600 million. So when you count what the county is contributing, when you count what the city is contributing, it's over $1 billion.
Public money.
That's before the land deal that the Rays are getting that's separate. That's before that's even put on the table. And there's estimates that that's going to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars as well.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it from the totality, and the reason that I gave for opposing it being one of two votes in July, and you can go back and look at the meeting, I mentioned two things. I mentioned the beaches and beach nourishment, and I mentioned the possibility of if we have a hurricane in future years. I didn't know that hurricane would come a couple months later.
Right.
And we had two of them. I mentioned the beaches and beach nourishment, and I mentioned the land deal as the two reasons. And I also mentioned if we could, if it was just 300 million and not having to finance it, I would have been a yes. Yeah. And so I just didn't, I love baseball, but more important than that, I'm a county commissioner that has to answer to my constituents.
And you've been vilified for this, and I think unfairly so. I wasn't thrilled when it appeared you were trying to hold the Rays hostage to play in Pinellas County, because I knew Baycare Park wasn't ready for that, and Steinbrenner was, and I think that's something you may have learned since then. And I understand it with the money. And by the way, why don't you ask the Rays to do a ticket package where the people have to stay in Pinellas County when they come to Rays games in Tampa? That would be a nice thing. Like, it will give you a lower ticket price for your package if you book it. And people are going to stay at the beach anyway if they come to see the Rays. At least I would. If I'm coming from Boston and New York, I'm not staying in downtown Tampa. I'm going to the beach. But anyway,
well, the Rays didn't talk to anybody.
Exactly. I was leading up to this.
And I go to, whether it's Threshers games or whether it's Phillies spring training games, I've been to that stadium a bunch of times. I've never taken a tour of their, clubhouse. I've never taken a tour of, the baseball part of it.
Right.
So I'm not familiar with, okay, this is up to MLB standards. This isn't. Right. All they had to do is say, hey, this makes playing in Clearwater more difficult. I knew from being a baseball fan that in 2021, Dunedin had Major League Baseball games during the regular season. Yeah, that stadium is a lot smaller than Steinbrenner.
Right.
But, my biggest complaint was we're using the tourist bed tax dollars to pay for this stadium. And if they're not playing in Pinellas, we're using up the very sources that we're not going to be able to recoup by them not playing here. And so that was my big complaint. And I also had and have concerns that the trop will be able to be repaired. And they weren't really talking about that either. And that's more the city, the city concern, not the county concern. Well, what happens if the Rays decide to play in Steinbrenner for the next 3 or 4 years?
Right.
I mean, that's 10% of the time that we're going to be financing this deal. And if they're not playing in Pinellas County, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
Because in the it was like 1994 or 95, whatever year that original contract use agreement was between the city and the Rays, or the baseball team, it basically states that St. Petersburg has to provide a place for them to play. Well, now they don't have a place for them to play. So there's an argument to be made that the Rays could just say, okay, instead of repairing the trop, give us X amount of dollars. And okay, well, if that happens, they're not going to be in Pinellas County.
Yeah.
So, it's my job to look out for my constituents, look out for our residents and our taxpayers. And so, I'm not just going to say, okay, we'll go have fun in Tampa and I'll drive across the bridge and watch a game.
And the fact the Rays didn't come to the county commission, they're not coming to the vote today, I believe, right? I think I've read that.
I mean, I hope they're there. They weren't at the last meeting. I hope they're there today.
Have you talked to them recently? Have you had any contact with them?
Not particularly, no.
And I got to ask you this: what do you think's happening in the vote today? All right, and what would your vote be if you had to vote today?
I mean, a no vote effectively kills the deal, and I don't want to kill the deal. And so, I would be, in favor of just delaying it and seeing, okay, because we have until March to approve the bonds.
Yeah, well,
And
that's
so,
the other thing. The original deadline was March to approve the
right,
bonds,
right,
and here, and if I can bring Stu into this, he's like, I'm killing the deal now because we've
right,
got,
right,
according to him. And by the way, I'm not going to take everything that he says and says to the Times as gospel because we've been fooled many, many times before.
right,
He's been very disingenuous about things,
right.
and so I'm not just going to take it on face value. How is it you can't go forward when the deadline was originally March anyway? That
Right.
doesn't work for me. Does that work for you guys?
Well, and you've been around, long enough to know that he's used this tactic for 10 years
Yes,
of
yes,
if I don't,
absolutely. I've
if I
highlighted it
don't
well
get
on my
X,
show.
I'm going here, you know, so, and it's interesting that he always uses a particular reporter and a particular newspaper to,
Yeah, I've had
you
issues with
know,
that as well. They don't, I know
use
Channel
his,
10 sent some questions over there, Evan Klosky.
right,
They're not answered. We've
right,
tried
right,
to, why not do a press conference? We're talking about the biggest expenditure in the history of the county and the city.
right,
And
right,
we can't have the owner do a press conference and be accountable
right.
to all media instead
And,
of just
and,
talking to one.
and I really feel bad for the position that the Rays are in,
I do
and the
too.
fact that the trop was damaged. 40,000 houses in Pinellas County suffered severe damage as a result of the two hurricanes. The Rays are not the only business in town that was devastated by the hurricanes.
Right.
We don't go around giving $1 billion to each of those businesses.
That's right.
And you know, so I would expect them to come to the table and say, okay, the situation is
It's
different than
changed.
it
Yeah.
was, and I find it ironic that the county commission delayed one time, and he's saying, okay, they're not good partners. When if you go back a year ago, when it's first starting, or maybe even more than a year ago, and you look, it was consistently delayed at the city council level. Oh, we're having a meeting this week to vote on it. Oh no, we're pushing it back a month. Well, it wasn't because they were worried about the votes. I
Right.
can give you that much.
Well,
It was because there were people that were negotiating that wanted to add things to it.
yeah.
And those people were not the city or the county. And so,
That was the Rays. It was the Rays asking for everything. Yeah, this has been called by people who have worked, by former mayors and people that have worked in county administrating and have done other deals that have looked at the deal as the worst deal we've ever seen in a stadium. It's the smallest city municipality to ever give the biggest corporate welfare tax subsidy for a stadium ever. I mean, the deal is terrible. It's been terrible from the beginning, in my opinion. And to me, I just see a county commissioner who's standing up to it and saying, I love baseball. I want baseball to stay here, but this is not fiscally responsible. And put on top of it now, an estimated $60 million in repairs. I've seen the pictures. Yeah. It's way more than that. And that's by visual estimates, by the way, folks. That's not engineers getting in there and actually seeing what's there. This is going to be over, I'm saying, close to $100 million. You're going to try and repair the trop and then blow it up 2 years later, 3 years later. And the mayor actually called this fiscally responsible. I don't get that. I don't get that. I know you met with the mayor yesterday. What transpired?
Yeah, I mean, the mayor and I are on opposite political spectrums. But I believe that he's an honest guy, and certainly he wants the Rays to stay, and he's trying to keep the deal together. And it was a productive meeting, and I don't want to speak for him, but um, I don't think the Rays are really talking to too many people in town.
Do you think they're trying to get out of the deal, and so Stu can take the real estate money, the huge windfall there of $600-700 million, and maybe sell the team? Do you think it seems like to me, if I really wanted to get the deal done, I'd be number one talking to Pinellas and saying, "Hey, sorry we didn't talk to you guys, but here's the deal and why we had to go." And I'm sure Major League Baseball had a big say in that. It just wasn't the Rays, but he hasn't done any of that.
I think when you have tried to for 10 years to say, if we don't get what we want, we're leaving town. And you don't show up to a meeting when they're voting to give you $300 million. Well, actually $600 million.
600 million. I'll correct you.
And then there's another meeting, and the county commission makes it clear, hey, we want you to stay in Pinellas County, talk to us. And at the meeting that we had last week, or week before last, several of my colleagues said, we haven't talked to them. We want them to stay in Pinellas. I was not the only one.
Right.
An hour after that meeting, they had a press conference or a press release with the Yankees saying we're playing in Tampa. I mean, that's not how you conduct business. So, I mean, if I'm trying to get out of a deal, I go to the newspaper and say, oh, well, they postponed one meeting, deal's off. Well, we still have 3 or 4 months to try to get something together. And
may I jump in here and say, and unfairly in that report, by the way, and that whole article that John Romano wrote, it basically painted you as the villain. As the villain, and you got death threats, so much so they had to arrest somebody. I hope you and your family are safe. That's just unconscionable. And there was nobody standing up saying, except maybe me, hey, wait a minute, it's not this guy's fault. He was a no vote to begin with anyway.
Right.
What are we doing? Why are we putting it on him? Come on now.
And for 2 years, the Times has written several times that, oh, by the way, the Phillies gave a political donation to his father, which was $10,000. Political donation, not a personal donation. They have never reported, oh, by the way, the Rays also gave his father a political donation. Those political donations total up to $30,000.
Oh, interesting. We didn't put that in the story?
No. And for 2 years, I've asked them, hey, please make this correction. Saturday, I emailed them, hey, please make this correction. And John Romano wrote back and said, I don't believe that this is relevant. I don't understand how him getting a Phillies donation is relevant to a Rays vote, but my father getting Rays donations is not relevant to me voting on a Rays stadium.
It's absolutely relevant, 100%. Right. And
then bizarrely in the same email, and I posted it online. He said, you also didn't mention that the Rays gave $1 million to the Tampa Bay Beaches Chamber of Commerce for hurricane relief. Well, I'm a Rays fan, but I don't work in their PR department. It's not my job to go on the county commission and say, hey, by the way, did y'all see that the Rays gave $1 million to hurricane relief?
Yeah, absolutely not. Do you trust Stu Sternberg? I mean, he was sued by his partners. I read that whole lawsuit. It's full of a lot of bad allegations. And I've said this before on my program. If I was giving away this much money to a billionaire, I would certainly want to make sure that I'm dealing with somebody on the up and up and really has Tampa Bay and St. Petersburg as their as something they want to champion. And at every turn, Stu Sternberg has said St. Petersburg is not a major league city. We cannot exist here. He's dogged St. Petersburg as a site for years, said he wanted to move to Tampa, and suddenly he got a deal where he got everything, and now St. Pete is a place to play. I think that's a little disingenuous, but he wanted to get the deal done. We've noted what a terrible deal it is for the taxpayers, something you don't agree with. Do you trust to do business with Stu Sternberg in this situation?
Well, Stu Sternberg and I have different priorities, I believe. And I've actually met him twice. The first time being about a year ago. The first time we met was at a social charity event. And we actually talked about Rays baseball. And I was complimenting him on the minor league system that they've developed and how it was good every year. And then we've had one meeting about the stadium, but he's not who I talked to or dealt with on the stadium matters. And we have different priorities. His priority is to make the most money as possible for his team. Kudos to him. That's part of running a business. He's done very well with the Rays. I believe that they probably turn a profit every year because of
Oh,
revenue
yes.
sharing, TV
Oh,
deal,
yes.
things like that.
A handsome profit.
Yeah, yeah, and to his credit, they have a competitive team. Regardless
Yeah,
of
but
what the
we'd all like
payroll
to see a
is,
little
they're
bit more
competitive.
payroll. We'd all
Yeah.
like to see that. And once again, today they
Right.
were shown that they're third worst in the league in free
Yeah.
agent spending in the last
Yeah.
few years.
Right.
He has the money.
But they do the best with what they put on the field. They're a
Yeah, they do.
competitive product.
They do.
My priority, though, is I want the best deal possible for the taxpayer, and the best deal for our residents. I would not put him in the same league as a Jeff Vinnick.
No.
When it comes to community relations, I would not. When he's no longer the owner of the Rays, he's not going to be around in the community. He's not
I would
going to
agree with that.
be, he's not going to be, like even the Steinbrenner family. They're active, in Tampa,
Yes.
or the, Glazer family, or people like that.
They've done a great job. Yes.
Right. And so he has different priorities, and I don't fault him for that. But his main priority is, getting the most money as he possibly can. And so, that's just, his deal.
How do you think this deal can be saved and be responsible to the taxpayers? Do you think the Rays would agree to put in more money or do this differently? And they listen. There's a huge amount of money available in this real estate deal that could be put towards the
Right.
stadium. I know he's allowed to sell that. He could literally sell it tomorrow to Hines for what it's really worth, up to $600 to $700 million. The other
Right.
acreage, just sell the team and walk with the money. Like that's
Right.
that, and that's what we've heard that could ask something I predicted 2 months ago, by the way,
Right.
and the stadium would never be built. Do you think that's possible?
Oh, I mean, that's certainly possible. And that's what some of our frustration was in July. I have not spoken to my colleagues, of course, because of the sunshine law. I saw a article this morning in the Times, that talked about what some of my colleagues were thinking. And it does seem like, some that were no's could be persuaded to yeses by doing something similar to what you said. And, hey, business is different than it was just a few months ago. We had
Thank
two
you.
hurricanes.
Yes.
And, nobody wants to see baseball leave, but, some of us that said this wasn't a friendly deal in July, now 2 hurricanes later, it certainly is not a friendly deal when we don't know what the Army Corps is going to do with the beaches.
And that money, by the way, I think another misnomer is that this money can only be used for stadiums and some other things, but it can also be used for beach renourishment and things, right? That money could be used for things that bring more people in. So it's something, right?
And we're currently in a fight with the federal government and the Army Corps of Engineers, because for decades that was something that the Army Corps of Engineers did. Now they're not doing it. They're saying that residents along the beaches have to sign easements over, which is a private property issue that I'm not going to bore sports fans with.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something that's never going to happen, because you have to get 100% of those property owners to do that.
Okay.
I believe that the federal government should do that. But if they don't, we're going to have to pay for that ourselves. And also FEMA has said, if you pay for it yourselves and a hurricane or any kind of storm comes, you will not get FEMA reimbursement. So that also puts us behind the 8 ball. And
part of the reason you're delaying the vote to find out how that's going to pan out.
Correct.
And you have an owner that's saying, I don't care that you've had hurricanes. It's just like, no, if you delay it, I'm out.
Right.
Even though the deadline was March, if you delay, I'm out. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a little.
So the vote to delay was 6-1.
Right.
The vote to approve the project in July was 5-2. 5 people for, 2 people against.
It's
Fast
a reasonable
to after the hurricane. The vote to delay was 6-1. So you do the math, and there's several people that voted for the project then said, okay, wait, let's delay this because there are now variables that we don't, we were not expecting, that we need to have some time on. And then you have Stu saying, oh, well, they're no longer, partners, and, baseball may be gone.
So the bottom line is on this, Chris, if there was a renegotiation of this, given the terms, and the fact that the Trop has to be rebuilt, then that's another huge expenditure.
Yeah.
I mean, is it the worst thing in the world if the deal gets scuttled? And I don't think they're leaving Tampa Bay, by the way. I don't think Major League Baseball is leaving the 11th largest market with the 18th largest market right down the road in Orlando. That's not happening. It doesn't fit their business model. They have a lot of national television contracts that are tied to that. It's not happening. And if the team did go back to Tampa and found a home there, your constituents would still be able to go to Rays games.
Yeah.
So it's not the worst thing. I was in Atlanta when the Braves did that deal, and the mayor said, look, I don't have money for the Falcons and you. If you want to go to Cobb County, that's great. Fine. I don't have to pay for it. My constituents can still have the Braves. And that has been a tremendous deal for Cobb County and the Braves. And they won a Super Bowl using that money, or a World Series using that money. So it's not the worst thing in the world. We want the Rays to stay, and it's best for the area. And I've always said this, Chris, St. Pete and Pinellas, we're a family here. You guys have the beaches, the beautiful beaches that we love. That's why we live here. You have a beautiful downtown. You have the PGA Tour event that's there. That's unbelievable in Innisbrook. You have the Pelican. I was just there on
the Annika
event. You have the Grand Prix that's there. You have soccer, and that all works so great there. The beautiful downtown. It's just, in my opinion, it's not the place for a baseball stadium because of the location. It's you don't need it, by the way. Build a convention center or a cruise port with that money, and you'll get a lot better return, by the way. And you can still go to Rays games. That seems to me like the best alternative. I know you want the Rays to stay in St. Pete, but that's where I'm coming from.
If they go to Tampa, I'm completely fine. My feelings will not be hurt, and it will save us a ton of money.
Yeah.
So, and I would be the first one that is shaking whoever brings them to Tampa's hands. And I would offer to buy tickets to go and see them. I just don't think, $1 billion to keep them in St. Pete is worth it. And if we're paying them, they need to be in Pinellas. That's been my whole argument. Whether they play in Pinellas or Hillsborough, if they want to play in Hillsborough, I'm fine with it full time. If they play in Hillsborough while Pinellas County's paying them, that's another issue.
I totally get that as well. I just think, if we looked at this from a regional standpoint, that's what we would do. And the constant in this whole thing, and people say, oh, Tampa doesn't have the money, Hillsborough doesn't have the money. They don't have the money that St. Pete did to give up front. But in the long run, the Rays would make more money with the deal that Hillsborough offered. I think it's a much more reasonable deal for the taxpayers. It's responsible to the taxpayers. And Tampa could get it done. The reason it hasn't been done is the same constant. It's never been done. And that's Stu Sternberg, because he wants everything and gives nothing. It's always a one-way conversation. That's what I've heard from the people that have negotiated with him. I was part of the Rays 100 when we did the deal, and we've constantly told there was no corporate support. That's a bold-faced lie. We had tons of corporate support. And so if there was new ownership and MLB forced new ownership, there would be a deal done within months in Hillsborough County. That's my opinion. And it would be best for the area. And you guys could build a beautiful convention center and make way more money. You think about it. It's actually $2.4 billion cost to taxpayers totally. You talk about the lost real estate deal, the interest on the payments. It's $2.4 billion to taxpayers in Pinellas and in the city of St. Pete. And you could sell that in the Kreisman plan for over $1 billion. That's a $3 billion switch. And you'd have a much better downtown. You'd have a much better. And as you said, if you put this up for a vote in Pinellas County and St. Pete, what do you think the margin would be? I think it would be 70-30 against.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say over 60% against, but you might be right that it would be closer to 70. Because do I want a new stadium, a Rays stadium? Absolutely. Ask anybody on the street, do you want a new Rays stadium? Oh, absolutely. Do you want to pay $1 billion from your taxes or public funds for it? The answer would be no.
No.
And it'd probably, by the end of the day, it'd be over $1 billion. And, when you talk about them moving, Show me another area in the country that has $600 million of public funds or more sitting on the table saying, okay, we're ready to have a sports team.
In addition to a
negotiate with-
$1.5 billion relocation fee or $1
Right.
billion relocation fee the owner would have to pay, in addition to buying the team for $2 billion.
Right.
And people just think, oh, they're going to Nashville, they're going to Portland, they're going. No. And by the way, MLB has to approve that.
Right.
A move. And why would they do that to themselves? Take an expansion fee from themselves and just, oh yeah, Stu, we love you. Yeah, go. That's cool.
And the other owners would much rather have expansion than have another team relocate.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, I mean, that's why he was, literally laughed at when he wanted to do the split city concept with Montreal.
That's right.
So,
well, Chris, listen, I hope you and your family are safe.
Oh yeah.
I hope that, nothing comes of any of that stuff. And I hope people stop vilifying you for doing what your constituents voted you to do. Yeah. And I appreciate you being bold enough to stand up for this and stand up for what's right, because it's so easy to just roll over and do the wrong thing. And I appreciate your courage in doing so and speaking out about it. I do appreciate that. So
thank you very much, JP. Good
All
to
right,
be
Chris.
with you.
Appreciate it. Be well.